Who are you? What's your role? And who do you work for?
Hi, my name's Liz Rice. I work at Isovalent, now part of Cisco, and I am Chief Open Source Officer there.
Liz, what do you want to share with us today?
Well, the exciting news, I've just come from the keynote where one of the Isovalent team, who is also one of the maintainers on Cilium, Joe Stringer, he has just been voted top committer stroke maintainer for the CNCF in 2024. So I'm super pleased for Joe about that. It's really exciting.
For people who don't know, although they should know, what problems are you solving at Isovalent?
Yeah, right. So we are the originators of the Cilium project, which provides networking and security and network observability as well for Kubernetes users. As Isovalent, we provide the Isovalent enterprise distribution, so really giving enterprises what they need to connect their Kubernetes clusters and also external workloads with really coherent security and deep observability. We also have Tetragon, which is our runtime security. All of this built on eBPF. The team is full of some real eBPF experts and pioneers, and it's a really powerful platform for building this kind of infrastructure tooling.
Regarding eBPF, what's been the sort of before and after of the arrival of eBPF on the scene in the Kubernetes ecosystem?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, a very small number of people had heard of eBPF and they didn't really know what it is, whereas now I think there's huge excitement about it as a technology. People are increasingly, understanding its power. There are more and more projects and vendors taking advantage of eBPF, and I think we're seeing huge adoption, not just of Cilium and Tetragon and products like Isovalent's products, but lots of other eBPF-based tooling across the ecosystem.
Are Cilium and Tetragon part of the CNCF? Are they open source and part of the CNCF landscape?
Exactly, yeah. So Cilium is a graduated project in the CNCF, and Tetragon is a sub-project within Cilium, along with Hubble, which is the observability component.
What's Isovalent's business model?
So we have the enterprise distribution, where enterprise users, if they're using Kubernetes in production and they have critical workloads, they need to know that those workloads are going to be securely connected. As I mentioned before, potentially also connected to external workloads, maybe some VM workloads, and they come to us to help us solve all those potentially complex networking and security issues.
Since you mentioned networking, we did a survey with a bunch of folks about what are their least favorite features in Kubernetes, and one of the ones that was mentioned most frequently was network policy management. Do you agree, or why do you think that is?
I think that's fair, and we actually had a Cilium Developer Summit earlier in the week with a small group of very involved contributors and maintainers, and actually network policy management was one of the topics that was brought up as something that can probably be improved. Now, that is something that in the Isovalent world, the enterprise distribution, we do have some much more sort of connected together components there to make it easier to manage your network policies.
Who are Isovalent's main competitors?
So in some senses, we compete against the Cilium open source project. We do have a lot of people who use the open source distribution very successfully. So in a lot of ways, that's the main people who could be using the Isovalent platform and aren't. Also, I guess I would say all the cloud providers have adopted Cilium in some shape or form. So they may be using Cilium as part of, for example, Google GKE. It's the Data Plane V2 is based on Cilium. They could be using the Microsoft Azure CNI that's based on Cilium. So there are lots of ways for people to consume Cilium in addition to consuming it through the Isovalent platform. But honestly, we think that's great, because the more people who are using Cilium, the better. I don't see it as a zero-sum game at all.
For some of the other, like you said, some of the, cloud providers that are out there, in terms of how they're offering, Cilium, eBPF, even Tetragon if it goes further, what differentiates Isovalent's offering?
I think really that we bring everything together in a really coherent package. You get to work with the experts. We have people like Daniel Borkman, who is one of the maintainers of eBPF in the kernel. So if there are things that require changes in the kernel, there is no better person, there is no greater expertise than you'll find in the Isovalent team.
What should we expect next from Isovalent?
That's a great question. So we were acquired by Cisco earlier this year, and one of the things that we're working on is with Cisco their Hypershield product, a security solution that leans quite heavily on the Tetragon technology that we're providing to them.
You know, Kubernetes turned 10 years old earlier this year. What do you expect in the next 10 years to come?
Oh gosh, that's a really great question. So, one of the consequences of the acquisition by Cisco is that I have, speaking personally, I've been involved in the Kubernetes world and the cloud native world for a long time, but I now realize there's this whole other world of people who are using VMs, that are using traditional workloads, who haven't yet or only dipping their toes in the water of cloud native. So I think there's a huge distance to go, and making sure that those users get coherent tools, consistent tools that allow them to manage their VM workloads and their containerized workloads in a consistent manner, so that they're not having to do sort of two sets of operations. I think certainly in 10 years that will be a solved problem.
Can you tell me about some news that came out on Cilium and eBPF Day?
Yeah, so Cilium and eBPF Day was a co-located event, and we announced the eBPF Foundation have published audit of the verifier that was commissioned from a third party. Actually did find and we have now fixed a vulnerability in the eBPF verifier, so that's actually really great progress. And we also announced a eBPF threat model that Control Plane have written to really assess the potential risks and benefits of using eBPF. So those are really great documents for people who are considering adopting eBPF-based tool to reassure themselves about the security of using eBPF as a platform.
If people want to know more, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, so I'm Liz Rice pretty much everywhere on the internet.